Hello, and welcome to the Smart Injury Doctors Podcast, the injury market's top program for doctors, lawyers, and insurers who want to gain greater insight on how to improve patient recovery results and deliver better services in the U.S. injury market. Please welcome your host, Dr. Jeffrey Allen Kronk.
Okay, what I want to talk about today is the basics of good, strong personal injury documentation. Look, doctors, it's not complicated. It's actually extremely simple. There's nothing complicated about it. The only thing that you're sometimes worried about, I think, as doctors, and I was too, is that, you're in a medical legal interface, and so you medically legally have to be sound so that you're basically coming through that medical legal interface just fine with what everybody needs. Now, I'm going to give you the largest tip that I'm going to give you in personal injury documentation, since it is a regulated industry, is that you want to, in every patient file, at least one, just one time, you want to document what guidelines you're using. Which guidelines are you using? Right? Now, the reason why you want to document which guidelines you're using is because those are the guidelines that you need to be judged against if anything arises where somebody's making a decision. Did you overtreat? Did you, do something outside of the guidelines that you've used, because that's how you're going to be judged. So the guidelines that I recommend, that I love, are one, the CCP guidelines, Council on Chiropractic Practice, Clinical Practice Guidelines. You can get them at ccp-guidelines.org. And you can see those. The other ones that I recommend, so, CCP guidelines for chiropractic, the ICA best practice guidelines for chiropractors are the other ones. So I use CCP and the ICA best practices, and these are very good guidelines that support pretty much everything that you're doing in a chiropractic practice. The ICA best practice guidelines also have the ICA best practice guidelines also have X-ray guidelines called the PCCRP guidelines. And those are, I think, the best X-ray guidelines in the world. So you want to list that first. But now here's the easy thing. So let's just get down to injury work. Injury work is simple once you start to think about it. And I'm going to read you a statement right from the developers of the software that a lot of insurers use. So if you think about it, let's say that in the, I don't care what state you're in. Let's say in your state just developed a new law that said, hey, a chiropractor or a medical doctor or a healthcare provider cannot have physical insurance on their property. If somebody gets injured on your property, you're 100% responsible. So you have to do what's called self-insured. You have to insure yourself. So somebody's, you look outside, you got this beautiful lawn in the front of your clinic. You look outside, somebody slipped off the cement, caught the edge and went over, and they fell in your soft grass. Now you come rushing out, you say, hey, what happened? And they say, gosh, I slipped, I fell. You ask them if they're hurt. They say, no, I don't think so. They get up, they're on their way. 9 months later, they show up with a nice, well-suited attorney, and they say, look, I'd like $150,000 from you. That's what we're going to take. You're going to ask, first question you're going to ask is, why? And they said, because the injury. Your first question is going to be, what injury? And how did you arrive at it? Like, which doctor worked it up? Was it an imageable injury? What is the injury? Your second question is going to be $150,000. Is it some sort of a permanent injury? Is this thing permanent? And then your next question is going to be, how is it affecting your life? Right? $150,000 is a lot of money. Are there things that you can't do? Those are called loss of enjoyment of life factors as a result of your injury. Are there things that you can do, but they cause you discomfort to do them? Those are called duties under duress factors. Right? And if you have these, and you have some sort of a permanent injury and it's ongoing, what is the future care that you're going to need to help with this injury? That's it. That's the basics of injury. That's the basics of what's the diagnosis? Is it permanent? Is it causing loss of enjoyment of life factors or duties under duress factors? And what are the future care needs with this patient? That is the beautiful thing about personal injury documentation is that's it. Now, I'm going to read something. So, people get really significant on this. They get significant, attorneys get significant on it. And I'm not a significant guy. What I like is I like to read stuff that's written. So I'm going to read, DX Technology is the owner of Colossus. So when they sell Colossus to insurance carriers, they market it, and they have marketing materials. So this is what a piece of their marketing materials says. Colossus is the insurance industry's leading expert system for assisting adjusters in the evaluation of bodily injury claims. Colossus provides adjusters access to your company's claims data with a defined business process management framework for evaluating injuries, treatment, resolution, impairment, and general damage settlements. Colossus helps your adjusters reduce the variance in payouts on similar bodily injury claims. Your adjusters, here's the key, your adjusters can quickly interpret medical reports and look up definitions of injuries. Those are called the ICD-9 or ICD-10 now, definitions of the injuries. So they can quickly look up these injuries, the treatments, complications, and permanent impairments using the AMA 5th edition data. Through a series of interactive questions, Colossus guides your adjusters through an objective evaluation of medical treatment options, degree of pain and suffering, degree of permanent impairment to the claimant's body, and the impact of the injury on the claimant's lifestyle. At the conclusion of the Colossus consultant, a summary of the claim is provided, including the recommended settlement range. Now, what did we say? It says, hey, you can look up these injury definitions. Those are the diagnoses. We can look up treatments to make sure the treatments go with what, if I've got if I've got no laceration, but I've got stitches, obviously the treatment doesn't go with the injury. We can look up complications and permanent impairments using AMA, now 5th and probably 6th edition data, right? We can also determine the impact of the injury on the claimant's lifestyle. Those are called loss of enjoyment of life, duties under duress. And at the conclusion of the Colossus consultation, a summary of the claim is provided, including the recommended settlement range. So it's just that easy. Now, is there more to it? Yeah, you have to use some outcome assessment procedures. You have to make sure that you're following your guidelines, and so that you're setting the person up for maximum medical improvement. So you're doing your job as the doctor to get to the point where you have the patient at maximum medical improvement. But the documentation itself is simple. And remember, maximum medical improvement is for each injury. If you have a shoulder injury, it's different than the MMI of the neck injury or the low back injury. Each area has its own MMI, right? Have you achieved maximum medical improvement with this injury? Yes, I have. Good. Is this one done? No, this one's not done yet. So it's very simple for each injury. It's pretty much the same. What's the diagnosis? Is it permanent? What kinds of, does it show any duties under duress or loss of enjoyment of life factors? And are there future care needs associated with this injury? So I know we can make it way more complicated. I've seen it way more complicated, but here's what I've seen. What I've seen is the very simple things that I'm talking about are not in the documentation. That's the simplicity of it. They're not in the documentation. When they're not in the documentation, you have deficient documentation. Deficient documentation leads to all kinds of problems. It leads to problems for the insurer, problems for the attorney, problems for the patient, and it can lead to problems for you as the doctor. Because if you have insufficient documentation, then it can lead to problems where somebody's saying you overtreated, or somebody's saying that the patient should have been, better a lot sooner than what they were, in which case, essentially, they're saying you overtreated. So to avoid any problems with that, you just want to simply document. And what I've just explained to you is the simplest way that I know to document, because it's logical. It follows what the logical or the logic of the injury itself. What's the injury? Is it permanent? What effect does it have on the person's life? Are there future ramifications to it? Period. That's it. Now, anywhere you look, if your documentation is not including that, it is deficient, because people cannot determine just exactly what I read from DXC Technology on Colossus. If you're missing data, then it's just you're feeding a system that you're feeding bad data into the system. So you don't want to miss the data. But it's not complicated. It's actually extremely simple. And that's what I wanted to go over today on today's podcast is just, keep your personal injury documentation simple. It doesn't have to be dramatic. Can you use great tools out there like, SEMGs and Dynaroms and your outcome assessment procedures? Yeah, you want all that. But you also want to keep it simple. Keep it simple so people can understand. The insurer can understand. The attorneys can understand. Everybody can understand. The medical doctors, anybody who's involved can understand. That's where you want to keep it. Doctors, short, sweet, and to the point, always. If you have any questions or you like what we do or you want to find out more about our program, you just go to smartinjurydoctors.com, hit the Learn More button, give us your email, give us your name, give us your email, and you'll see we'll route you right through. You can see all kinds of really cool testimonials about people that are involved in our program, have been involved in our program. And you can also learn more, see a short video about what our program's all about. So if you have interest, go to www.smartinjurydoctors.com or call us at 800-940-6513. I thank you for your attention, and I'll see you on the next podcast.
You've been listening to the Smart Injury Doctors Podcast, the #1 audio production show for professionals in the U.S. injury market that want to deliver better injury services to the patients, clients, or insureds they serve. If you like what you heard today, please leave us a review and don't forget to join us on our next program.